Most people grow up believing that money is the natural reward for hard work. The idea sounds simple and fair. If you work harder, become more skilled, and remain patient long enough, wealth will eventually follow. It is a comforting belief because it suggests that the system rewards effort. However, if you look closely at the real world, that belief begins to break down. Many of the hardest working people in society are not wealthy at all. They wake up early, work long hours, and give everything they have to their jobs. Yet financial freedom remains distant. At the same time, there are people who appear to accumulate wealth far more easily. They are not always the most talented, and they are not always the most hardworking. Yet somehow money flows toward them. This contradiction raises an uncomfortable question. If money were purely the reward for effort, why do these differences exist? To understand this, we need to examine money from a psychological perspective rather than a purely economic one. Few thinkers understood the psychological nature of power and influence better than Niccolò Machiavelli. Although he wrote about political power centuries ago, many of the patterns he observed apply remarkably well to the way wealth works today. Machiavelli is often remembered as a ruthless strategist who encouraged manipulation and ambition. His name has become associated with cold calculation and the pursuit of power at any cost. But when you study his work carefully, a different picture begins to emerge. Machiavelli was not simply encouraging people to be ruthless. He was studying human behavior as it actually operates. He tried to understand why some individuals gained influence while others remained powerless. His observations revealed that success is rarely determined by effort alone. It is shaped by perception, timing, narrative, and psychological positioning. Although Machiavelli wrote about princes and rulers, these same dynamics appear everywhere in modern society, including the way money moves through markets and opportunities. Understanding these dynamics does not mean manipulating people or acting without integrity. The purpose of studying psychology is not to exploit others, but to understand the environment you are operating within. Many people unknowingly follow rules that do not actually govern success. They believe the system rewards one set of behaviors, while in reality, it often rewards something else entirely. By recognizing the psychological forces behind wealth, you can make decisions with greater awareness rather than relying on assumptions that may not reflect how the world actually works. In this video, we will explore several psychological principles that influence how money is created and accumulated. These ideas mirror the same patterns Machiavelli described in The Dynamics of Power. You will see how perception shapes value, how narratives influence opportunity, why scarcity increases demand, and why detachment and patience often play a critical role in financial growth. Once you understand these principles, you will begin to recognize them everywhere, from branding and marketing to investment strategies and personal positioning. Before going further, consider a simple question. Why do two people with similar abilities often end up with completely different financial outcomes? One may struggle for years to gain recognition, while the other seems to attract opportunities almost effortlessly. The explanation is rarely just intelligence or effort. More often, it involves psychological factors that shape how others perceive and respond to them. Number 1. Perception creates value. Most people grow up believing something simple about money. They assume that if something is useful, people will naturally pay for it. And if something is truly good, its value will become obvious over time. The idea sounds fair, and it feels logical. But if you quietly observe how money actually moves in everyday life, a different pattern begins to appear. Value is rarely determined by what something truly is. More often, it is determined by how people see it. You can notice this in ordinary places. Imagine two shops on the same street. They sell almost the same product, and in some cases the items even come from the same supplier. The first shop is simple and straightforward. The lights are bright, the shelves are full, and the prices are clearly written on small tags. People walk in during the day. They look around for a few minutes. Someone picks up an item and turns it slowly in their hands. Their eyes move to the price tag. For a moment, their expression changes slightly. Then they place the item back on the shelf and say something polite like, "I'll think about it," or "Maybe I'll come back later." The owner usually nods. The door closes, and the room becomes quiet again. Now walk a few doors down the street. The second shop sells almost the same thing. Yet the moment you step inside, the atmosphere feels different. The lighting is softer. The shelves are spaced farther apart. Instead of crowded racks, a single object might sit alone on a wooden table. There is space around it, almost as if the object deserves attention. The price here is noticeably higher. Sometimes it is double or even triple what the first shop charges. Yet people still buy it. They hold the object carefully. They examine it slowly. Sometimes they ask a question, but often they simply nod and bring it to the counter. No one openly explains why this item feels more valuable. They just feel it. Nothing about the object itself has really changed. The material is the same, the function is the same, and the usefulness is the same. What has changed is the way the object appears to the person looking at it. The same pattern appears in restaurants. Two places might serve nearly identical meals using the same ingredients and similar recipes. In one restaurant, the plate arrives quickly. The lights are bright. The tables are close together, and the room is filled with noise. The meal costs a small amount. In another restaurant, the room is quieter. The lighting is softer, and the waiter places the plate on the table with care. People sit a little straighter in their chairs. Conversations become quieter. Sometimes diners pause to take a photo before they begin eating. The meal costs much more, yet no one seems surprised. What people are paying for in that moment is not just the food. They are paying for how the experience feels. Once that feeling settles in the mind, the higher price begins to look normal. In fact, it can start to feel expected. You can see the same thing in smaller moments of everyday life. A man walks into a room wearing a plain shirt with no logo or symbol on it. The fabric is fine, but nothing about it stands out. Most people barely notice him. The next day he walks into the same room wearing the same shirt, but this time a small brand symbol sits near the collar. Someone notices immediately and asks where he bought it. The fabric did not change. The stitching did not change. Yet something about the shirt now carries a different meaning. The way people see it has shifted, and that shift quietly changes how much value they attach to it. Something similar happens in conversations. During a meeting, one person shares an idea with the group. The idea is reasonable and well explained, but the room reacts politely rather than enthusiastically. People nod once or twice and then move on to another topic. Later in the same meeting, another person says almost the same thing. Before they speak, someone casually mentions that they once worked for a well-known company. Suddenly the room listens more carefully. People lean forward slightly. A few begin taking notes. The idea itself has not changed, but the perception of the person presenting it has changed the way the idea is received. This is how perception quietly shapes value. People do not always measure something by examining it deeply. Instead, they rely on signals that suggest importance. They notice the surroundings, the presentation, and the reactions of others. Over time, those signals create a belief. Once enough people share that belief, the value begins to feel obvious, almost as if it has always been there. But if the same object appeared somewhere else under different conditions, the value could quietly shrink again. Most people never stop to question this process. They simply feel that something is valuable and accept the feeling as natural. And by the time they leave the room, the price already makes sense. Number 2. Control of narrative. People often believe they make decisions based on practical reasons. They say they choose things that work well, last long, and make sense for their needs. But if you observe how people actually make choices, another influence quietly appears. People are rarely buying an object alone. More often, they are buying the story attached to it. Imagine someone standing in front of 2 watches in a store. Both watches tell time accurately. Both are reliable and carefully made. One costs a few $100s, while the other costs several thousand. The cheaper watch sits on a simple display. It does exactly what a watch is meant to do. The expensive watch, however, sits inside a glass case. Next to it is a small card describing where it came from. The card does not focus on the function of the watch. Instead, it describes a small workshop where skilled craftsmen spend hours assembling tiny parts by hand. It mentions a long tradition and the careful attention that goes into every piece. The buyer reads the card slowly, then they look at the watch again. Something about it now feels different. It is no longer just a tool for telling time. it begins to feel like a small part of a larger story. When the buyer places the watch on their wrist, they are not thinking about minutes or seconds. They are thinking about the idea the watch represents. The same pattern appears in many industries. A technology company releases a new device. The device itself might not look very different from others already on the market, but when the company presents it, they rarely begin with technical details. Instead, they talk about the future. They describe a world that is faster, simpler, and more connected. They show images of people using the device in ways that feel exciting and effortless. As people watch the presentation, they begin imagining themselves inside that future. Once that image settles in the mind, the device begins to feel more important than it did a few minutes earlier. The story has quietly increased its value. You can observe the same effect with companies themselves. A small business might create a product that works extremely well. The people who try it are satisfied, and the quality is undeniable. Yet very few people hear about it. Another company might release something similar that is not necessarily better, but this company speaks confidently about what it is building. Its founders give interviews, articles are written about their vision, and their message spreads across many platforms. People begin repeating that message in conversations. Soon, the company starts to feel important. Investors show interest, journalists ask questions, and customers feel more comfortable trusting it. The difference is not always in the product itself. Often, the difference lies in the story people believe about. You can see the same pattern in ordinary social situations. Someone introduces a friend at a gathering by saying, "This is Daniel. He started a small business last year." People nod politely and continue their conversations. Later, someone else introduces him differently. "This is Daniel. He's building something interesting." The room reacts in a slightly different way. People become curious. They ask questions and lean closer to hear more. Daniel has not changed at all. The only thing that changed was the story attached to his name. Stories shape how people interpret what they see before they even examine it closely. Once a story settles into people's minds, they begin carrying it forward themselves. They repeat it to others, share it in conversations, and slowly spread it without even thinking about where it began. Over time, the story becomes larger than the object or the person it describes, and when that happens, people begin trusting it, investing in it, and paying for it. Eventually, the story feels so familiar that it stops feeling like a story at all. It simply feels like reality. Number 3. Scarcity creates desire. Most people assume they want things simply because those things are useful or enjoyable. They believe their decisions are calm and practical. If something serves a purpose, they buy it. If it does not, they move on. But when you quietly watch how people behave around limited opportunities, a different pattern begins to appear. When something is easy to obtain, people rarely feel urgency. They assume it will still be there tomorrow. Because of that assumption, they give themselves permission to delay the decision. You can see this in everyday situations. Imagine a small store releasing a new product. On the first day, the shelves are full. Boxes are neatly arranged, and anyone who walks in can easily pick one up and take it to the counter. Customers walk past the display without much hesitation. Some pause briefly, hold the item for a moment, and then place it back where they found it. They say things like, "I'll come back later," or "I might get it next week." The store remains quiet, and the product sits there waiting. Now imagine the same store a week later. The display looks different. Only a few pieces remain on the shelf, and a small sign beside them mentions that the item is nearly sold out. Suddenly people stop longer than before. When someone picks up the product, they look at the shelf again and notice how little is left. They also notice other customers glancing at it. The same object that once seemed ordinary now feels slightly more important. The possibility that it might disappear creates a subtle tension in the mind. Even people who were not planning to buy it begin considering the idea more seriously. The change did not come from the product itself. It came from the feeling that access might soon be gone. This pattern appears in many areas of life. Restaurants provide a simple example. Early in the evening, a restaurant may have empty tables and an open door. People walk past without much curiosity, because they assume they can enter at any time. Later in the night, the atmosphere changes. The dining room becomes full, and a small line begins forming near the entrance. Those who pass by slow down and look inside. Some check the menu posted near the door. Others quietly join the line. Nothing about the food changed during that time. The only difference is that the opportunity to sit down now appears limited. Scarcity quietly signals importance. The same dynamic appears with memberships or private groups. When a club allows unlimited entry, people treat it as ordinary. The door is open, and anyone who wants to join can do so immediately. But when a group limits access through invitations or waiting lists, curiosity grows. People begin wondering what happens inside and why entry is restricted. Even individuals who never considered joining before start to feel a small pull of interest. Restriction creates the impression that something valuable might be taking place behind that door. This reaction often happens quickly and almost automatically. When the mind senses that an opportunity might disappear, attention becomes sharper. People begin imagining what it would feel like to miss the chance. Someone browsing a website might see a message saying that only a few spots remain. They pause and read it again. Just a moment earlier, they were planning to leave the page and think about it later. Now they hesitate. The thought of returning tomorrow and finding nothing left becomes uncomfortable. So the decision that once felt easy to delay suddenly feels urgent. In many cases, the object itself has not changed at all. The only difference is the possibility that it might not remain available for long. Once that possibility enters the mind, desire often grows stronger than it was before. Number 4. Detachment from approval. Another quiet influence on financial decisions comes from the need for approval. Many people do not realize how often this need shapes the choices they make. It rarely appears in obvious ways. Instead, it shows up as hesitation during moments when a decision might invite disagreement. Consider someone who has spent years developing a skill. Their work improves gradually, and eventually they reach a point where they could reasonably charge a higher price. Yet when they sit down to tell a client what their work costs, something inside them becomes uncertain. They begin thinking about how the other person might react. They imagine a pause on the other side of the table, or a raised eyebrow that signals doubt. Rather than waiting for that reaction to happen, they adjust their price before the conversation even begins. They present a lower number, hoping it will feel easier for the other person to accept. The moment passes smoothly. The client agrees quickly, and the meeting ends without tension. But as they leave, a quiet thought remains. They realize the price was not determined by the true value of the work. It was determined by the desire to avoid rejection. The same pattern often appears during negotiations. Two people sit across from each other discussing an opportunity. One of them knows the outcome they hope for and has already decided what they plan to ask. However, when the moment arrives to say the number out loud, their voice slows slightly. They glance at the other person, searching for signs of approval. A small silence fills the room. Then they soften the request or lower the amount. The conversation continues comfortably, but the decision has already shifted. It shifted because approval felt more important than the original plan. This hesitation can also influence larger choices. Someone may think about pursuing a more ambitious opportunity or introducing a new idea. At first, the thought feels exciting. It seems possible. Then another question appears. What will people think? They imagine friends questioning the decision, or colleagues quietly criticizing it. The fear is not dramatic. It often appears as a small sense of discomfort that encourages them to move more cautiously. Sometimes that small discomfort is enough to stop the idea completely. In social situations, you can see how easily approval affects behavior. A person begins sharing an opinion during a conversation, but halfway through their explanation, they soften their words. They add phrases like, "I might be wrong," or "this is just a thought." Their tone becomes careful, as if they are adjusting their position while they speak. The goal is not necessarily to express the idea clearly. The goal is to avoid creating tension in the room. Over time, this habit can shape financial decisions as well. People who constantly look for agreement often adjust their actions to match the expectations around them. They lower prices, avoid difficult negotiations, or step away from opportunities that might invite criticism. Others approach these moments differently. They still hear disagreement and still notice when someone disapproves. The difference is that those reactions no longer determine the decision itself. When they present a price or propose an idea, they state it clearly and allow the other person to respond. Sometimes, The answer is no. Sometimes the room becomes quiet for a moment, but the decision does not immediately shift in order to restore approval. Gradually, this creates a different dynamic. Conversations become more balanced, and negotiations feel more direct. Not everyone agrees with them, and not every opportunity works out. But their direction is no longer guided by the changing moods of the people around them. And once approval stops being the main signal guiding a decision, a person often begins to move with far less hesitation. Number 5. Strategic patience. Many people believe success comes from constant action. They feel that if they move fast enough and say yes to every opportunity, something will eventually work out. At first, this approach feels productive. There is always something happening. Calls are made, meetings are scheduled, ideas are discussed. The calendar fills up quickly, and the person feels busy almost every day. But when you observe closely, a strange pattern begins to appear. Not every moment carries the same weight. Some decisions matter very little, while others quietly shape everything that follows. The difficult part is that those important moments are not always obvious when they first appear. Imagine someone who invests money for the first time. They read headlines, watch the market closely, and react to every small movement they see. When prices rise, they feel excited and rush to participate. When prices fall, they panic and try to escape before losing more. Their actions follow emotion rather than timing. After a while, they realize something unsettling. Many of their decisions were made during moments of noise rather than moments of clarity. They moved quickly, but the direction kept changing. Now imagine someone else watching the same market. They also notice the rise and fall, but their reaction is quieter. Instead of responding immediately to every change, they wait. Weeks pass, sometimes months. During that time, they observe patterns, gather information, and allow their resources to grow slowly. To someone watching from the outside, it might look like nothing is happening at all, but waiting is not the same as doing nothing. It is simply the decision to act only when the moment feels right. This pattern appears outside financial markets as well. Consider someone building a business. Opportunities appear regularly. Invitations arrive, partnerships are suggested, and new projects are offered. At first, it seems wise to accept everything. Each opportunity feels like progress. Yet after a while, the effort becomes scattered. Energy spreads across too many directions, and nothing receives enough attention to grow properly. Another person approaches these moments differently. They listen carefully when opportunities appear, but they do not rush to accept them. Instead, they pause and think about whether the situation truly fits their long-term direction. Sometimes the answer is no. Turning down the opportunity feels uncomfortable at first. It can look like hesitation from the outside. Others might wonder why the person is waiting instead of moving quickly. But the waiting has a purpose. Resources slowly build during that time. Experience grows, knowledge becomes deeper, and when the right moment finally appears, the person is prepared to act with much more strength than before. Timing quietly changes outcomes. A decision made too early can fail simply because the conditions are not ready yet. The same decision made later can succeed easily once the environment has shifted. This is why patience often appears in the background of successful outcomes. From the outside, it sometimes looks like sudden success, but the truth is usually slower than that. Long periods of waiting often exist before the visible action takes place. During those quiet periods, little seems to be happening. But that silence is often where the real preparation occurs. Number 6. Leverage multiplies results. Most people begin their working lives in the same way. They trade their time for money. They wake up, go to work, complete tasks, and receive payment for the hours they spend doing those tasks. The arrangement feels familiar because almost everyone around them is doing the same thing. For a while, it works well enough. The effort produces income, and the structure feels stable. But over time, a quiet limitation becomes clear. Time does not expand. There are only so many hours in a day, and once those hours are spent, they cannot be used again. Even if someone works harder, the number of hours they can exchange remains limited. Many people feel this pressure without fully understanding it. They begin taking on more work, extending their schedules, and filling their days with additional effort. Yet the results grow slowly compared to the effort required. Eventually, some people begin looking for a different path. Instead of relying entirely on their own time, they start creating systems that continue working even when they are not directly involved. A small business might hire employees who keep the operation running throughout the day. An investment might produce returns long after the initial decision has been made. The first time this happens, the feeling is unusual. Money appears without the person repeating the same effort again and again. At first, it seems small. A single decision produces a small return over time, but gradually, the pattern becomes clearer. One decision can continue creating value long after the moment it was made. You can see this difference in everyday situations. Imagine two people finishing the same task. One of them must repeat the work every day in order to be paid again. The other spends time building something that continues operating after the initial effort is complete. In the beginning, the second person may appear slower. While they are building the system, little visible income appears. But once the structure begins to function, the results no longer depend entirely on the hours they personally work. The effort has multiplied itself. Businesses grow this way. Investments grow this way. Even ideas can spread this way once they are placed into systems that continue operating on their own. The shift can feel subtle at first. Nothing dramatic happens overnight. But over time, the difference becomes clear. One path requires repeating the same effort every day in order to maintain progress. The other allows a single decision to continue producing results long after the original work has been completed. And once someone experiences that difference for the first time, they rarely look at effort in quite the same way again. At this point, it may be helpful to reflect on your own approach to money. Many people focus almost entirely on increasing effort. They work longer hours, take on additional responsibilities, and push themselves harder each year. But effort alone does not necessarily create financial breakthroughs. Real progress often requires improving perception, shaping narrative, recognizing scarcity, developing psychological independence, practicing patience, and building leverage. When these elements come together, financial growth becomes far more sustainable. It is important to understand that these principles are not new inventions. Machiavelli did not create them. He simply observed how human behavior naturally operates. The psychological dynamics that influence power also influence markets, reputation, and wealth. Learning about these patterns does not mean abandoning ethics or integrity. Instead, it provides a clearer view of the environment in which decisions are made. When you understand the forces shaping success, you can navigate them more intelligently. If this perspective has changed the way you think about money, consider subscribing to The Less You Look. On this channel, we explore the psychology of power, influence, discipline, and the hidden systems shaping modern life. Most people spend their lives focusing only on the visible side of success. They work harder, push further, and hope recognition will eventually follow. But beneath the surface lies a deeper system governed by perception, psychology, and strategic positioning. Those who learn to recognize these hidden patterns begin to see opportunities others overlook. And as Machiavelli understood centuries ago, the real advantage rarely belongs to the strongest or the busiest. It belongs to those who understand how the game is actually played.